So the questions I'm asking today, well, it's two questions really. It's can we afford to be green? And I'll be looking in that at the challenges that the industry is facing at the moment and the objections people may have towards ELT trying to follow a green agenda. And the other question, which is implicit in my original presentation question, is can we afford not to be green? In other words, the opportunity cost. How might we be missing out if we don't go green? And then we'll look at what we can do and what help there is to help us do this. So I wanted to start with checking where you stand personally and institutionally on green issues. So I wonder if you could scan the QR code or just go to menti.com and put in that voting code, and you should find a question waiting for you there. Questions are, speaking personally, how big a threat to your future is the climate and ecological crisis? And then institutionally, to what extent is environmental action important in your organization? Okay, so thank you everybody for voting. Oh great, I just got another one, good. So speaking personally, how big a threat to your future is the climate and ecological crisis? And 2/3 of you are saying that it's a huge threat, and a third of you are saying it's something of a threat, which is, pretty much what I think I would have expected. But let's see how that compares to how you feel your institution feels about these things, and to what extent is environmental action important in your organization. It's more a medium priority for most organizations. So, I mean, it's close, but it's almost 50-50, but, it's still, not as important organizationally as it is to us personally. I suppose the simple reason for that could be because you're here attending this talk and others in your organization are not. So that could be a simple reason for that. But there's a bit of a disconnect, I think you'll agree then, between how some of us are feeling personally about things and how our organizations are responding to the same things. So why is it that our organizations are less bothered about this situation or are reacting less to this situation than we personally feel? Well, I've been doing a bit of thinking about this, obviously, in preparation for this discussion, and came up with these basically. One is cost. People are kind of saying, well, it's a cost we can't afford at the moment. It's not our job. Is another one. Our job's to teach English. It's not to evangelize, perhaps they might say, about green issues. People are a bit worried about greenwashing. There may be people who say things like, look, our industry has a heavy carbon footprint, and there's no disguising that. So any attempt to do that looks like greenwashing, and we're just going to steer clear of that and just do what we do. There may be some people who think it makes no difference. It's either we're all too far gone and we just do what we can in the present because there's too much to think about in the future, and connected to that, they just want to get on with life. I don't want to think about it too much. I want to make a profit, or I want to earn my salary, and I want to go out and enjoy my life, and I just don't want to think about the future too much because it doesn't look too good. So those might be the kind of personal objections that we come up against, and of course there's the one that you've added, which is simply, I don't know what you're talking about. They haven't engaged with the issues at all. It's not even on their radar. Sorry about the little woodpecker noises. And then on top of that, there are kind of institutional challenges that might be taking people's eye off the ball in terms of what they can do to, advance the green agenda. COVID is fortunately seems to be kind of settling into the background a bit, but I mean, it's still affecting travel from China, for example, and it's obviously still a threat if new variants emerge. And then there are staffing issues. Lots of organisations are reporting difficulty filling staff vacancies. We're not allowed to employ people from the EU unless they have a special permit, if they've worked in the UK before. So that's all resulting in increased salaries. And then there are travel logistics. There are queues at airports, widely reported in the media. There are issues with baggage handling, not enough staff to handle baggage. There are services, which, airlines like British Airways have just decided to not offer anymore. So all of these things are making the logistics of travel more difficult. And then finally, a new one for us, it's inflation, and not just salaries, but energy, food prices, and obviously there are knock-on effects for language schools, for accommodation providers, boarding schools, etc., who are seeking to pass on their costs in increased prices to the likes of English country schools. So in the context of this, I wanted to draw your attention to a survey, a very recent survey that reports a reduction in the number of people around the world who think climate change is a very serious threat. And I'll just read this to you. Concerns about climate change shrank across the world last year, with fewer than half of those questioned in a new survey believing it posed a very serious threat to their countries over the next 20 years. Only 20% of people in China, the world's biggest polluter, said they believed that climate change was a very serious threat, down 3 percentage points from the last survey in 2019. Globally, the figure fell by 1.5 percentage points to 48.7 in 2021. The big survey was based on more than 125,000 interviews in 121 countries, so it does seem to have credibility. The COVID-19 pandemic and concerns about more immediate issues such as health and livelihoods may partly explain the drop, according to the survey's authors. Okay. So what does this mean for us? Well, on the face of it, it's rather depressing. It's typical of the sort of short-termism that we see, and you can't blame people if they're facing immediate issues. They want to deal with those rather than thinking more logistically about the future and how they can help to shape the future. But on the other hand, and we see this in British government policy as well, fossil fuel licenses being handed out to try and secure, putting the best possible light on it, trying to secure energy supplies in the present at the cost of future generations. I mean, that's short-termism, isn't it? But on the other hand, even with the reduction in apparent concern that's shown in that survey, that still leaves nearly 50% of people in the survey believing that climate change is a serious threat. They may have gone down, but there are still a lot of people around the world who believe it's a serious threat, and there may be many more who believe it's quite a serious threat, for example. I mean, that could take it up to 75%, I don't know. And the survey doesn't break down the figure by demographics. And we might suppose, for example, that younger people are more concerned than older people, less conservative, less set in their ways. Perhaps more educated people are more concerned than less educated, I don't know. Perhaps professionals are more concerned than other workers, etc. So we need to be wary when looking at surveys like that of our industry response to it. And then finally, relatively low rates of concern. I mean, even if it means 50% of people are not really bothered by or are not knowledgeable about what is coming down the road. These low rates of concern or understanding or acceptance actually represent an opportunity for English language teaching to use its influence to reach those people from around the world in our schools. So the second question I was asking was, can we afford not to be green? And these are kind of the opportunity costs of not being green as an organization. So if 50% of people across 121 countries think climate change is a very serious threat, that would imply that we need to address that concern. And I was walking through Cheltenham the other day, passing a clothing outlet called Superdry. And there are notices all over the windows saying, carbon neutral, we're now a carbon neutral company. And I was thinking, why are they bothering to do that? And the answer is simply that they see that they don't want to put anything in the way of people stepping into their shop. So there are obviously concerns around fast fashion, and Superdry are saying to the young people passing in the street, don't worry about that, we've got it sorted. Is it greenwashing? I don't know enough about Superdry. But my point is that we don't really want to put anything in the way of people who are concerned about climate change. So as language schools, one of the things that we want to do is to put up a sign in our windows, if you like, saying, if you're concerned about climate change, so are we. And I'm sorry, it sounds terrible, but in marketing terms, you're removing somebody's objection, therefore you're more likely to make a sale. I mean, if you look around the different schools in our industry, there are many now promoting their green credentials. And we've got to ask, why are they doing that? And in addition to meeting people's or removing people's objections, they also want to attract environmentally aware clients. So there may be people who specifically say, actually, yes, I want to go and learn English, but I only want to go and learn English in a school that shares my ethics, my ethos, my beliefs on climate and ecology. So some people might actually choose our schools just for their commitment to environmental sustainability. And then there is this, this weird reality. It's expressed in this graph, which was in The Guardian this morning, actually. I'm sure many of you have seen this before. You're probably getting a bit fed up with seeing this rather depressing graph. It shows levels of CO2 in the atmosphere, of course, parts per million. And we know as a scientific fact that increased gas emissions like CO2 and methane lead to global warming, and that global warming leads to extreme weather events. And of course, we can all see those events around us with extreme temperatures, wildfires in Australia, USA, Europe, flooding in Pakistan that has displaced over 30 million people, and so on. So that's the reality. And lots of reports have come out this week, possibly in the lead up to COP27. This one from the United Nations saying that the United Nations finds no credible pathway to 1.5 degrees in place. This report tells us in cold scientific terms what nature has been telling us all year through deadly floods, storms and raging fires. We have to stop filling our atmosphere with greenhouse gases and stop doing it fast. So that's the background. And just to add a little bit of balance maybe, this is from The Guardian yesterday. This is the International Energy Agency, an organization which is not noted for exaggeration. And this, almost by contrast, says that we may already be at a turning point. Global carbon emissions from energy will peak in 2025 thanks to massively increased government spending on clean fuels in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, according to analysis by the world's leading energy organization. The IEA said planned investments in green energy in response to the crisis meant that for the first time, government policies would lead to demand for polluting fossil fuels peaking this decade. The agency, and this is the very encouraging bit for me, the agency cited notable contributions from the US Inflation Reduction Act, the EU's Emissions Reduction Package, and actions by Japan, South Korea, China, and India. Now, that to me is great because it means that some governments, at least, are beginning to take or are acting on the seriousness of the situation. And this is also from a report in today's Guardian. And again, I'll just read it to you quickly. Climate experts agree that every action that limits global heating reduces the suffering endured by people from climate impacts. The 1.5 degrees C target is now near impossible, but every fraction of a degree will equate to massive avoided damages for generations to come. And then somebody called Rockstrom, I think Johan Rockstrom, I think, said, despite the fact that the situation is depressing and very challenging, I would strongly advise everyone to act in business or policy or society or science. The deeper we fall into the dark abyss of risk, the more we have to make efforts to climb out of that hole. It's not as if we don't know what to do, it's rather that we're not doing what's necessary. So putting all of that together, I conclude that we're in a difficult situation, but that everything that we can do will still make a difference. So to me, this reinforces the value of our efforts as an industry, as ELT, however small. And the efforts that we make are also being carried out by millions of individuals, businesses, cities, and increasingly governments. And these can and already are making a difference. So that's what we're part of. So what does this really have to do with ELT? Well, sorry, I don't know what's happened there. Oh yes, sorry, yeah. What does this really have to do with ELT? Well, it's because we're an industry that's focused on the future. So education is about the future, and the very point of our profession is to help our students have a better future. And the question is, what's the point of teaching them English in the short term if we're disregarding or even adding to the problem in the long term? So my argument is that as responsible educators, as mature human beings, we need to be good ancestors and do what we can within our own sphere of influence to help safeguard the future. And I would argue that we have actually no choice. I mean, we can close our eyes and pretend the present is all there is. But actually, if we want a future in which we can continue to do business and our students and children and grandchildren can thrive, then we have to be part of the effort being undertaken by so many others to address the climate and ecological emergency facing us. So that's the rationale. That's how I would answer the question, can we afford not to be green? And having affirmed our commitment to helping to create a better future, the next question is, well, the next questions are, what can we do actually? And as a subsidiary to that, what help is there for ELT organizations that want to operate more sustainably? And actually, I think we can do a lot, I really do. And so I put together this little map showing the main areas of activity of a typical school. Transport, both in the UK and to and from the UK, food, teaching, admin, utilities like, electricity, water, etc. Staff, accommodation providers, whether that's homestay or university or boarding schools or whatever. Buildings and grounds, if it's a year-round school. And I've added local community. And I'm very sorry to say that as a summer school, we have not really made local community connections. But I think year-round schools, I'm hoping, have and do have quite strong connections in the local community where they can act in a sustainable and responsible way. I was looking at the Nile website just the other day, and I see that they have free lessons on certain days of the week. And I think they use them so that people who are paying to do teacher training courses can have people to practice on, so they're effectively guinea pigs, presumably with a supervisor. So I've no doubt the lessons are absolutely fine. I'm not making any comment there, but the point is that those are free lessons that they're able to give to the community, and that's brilliant, isn't it? It's just a lovely link there to local people who might not otherwise be able to afford those lessons. And considering these areas, we can then ask 4 basic questions. One is, how can we reduce greenhouse gases? Now, it's a big question, but it's worth asking for each area of our activity, because you know, we might get sidetracked into, I don't know, removing litter or removing single-use plastics. And those are all really good things. But if we're not actually in the round reducing greenhouse gases, then we're failing in what we're trying to do. And then this second question, how can we increase biodiversity? This is not a question that I think ELT organizations ask themselves very much, but it is, like the greenhouse gases question, it's a really important one. Because, I mean, we are living through the 6th mass extinction of species, and yet actually we know that nature bounces back remarkably quickly, either left alone or given a helping hand. So, you know, we shouldn't be ignoring opportunities to assist with this, particularly if we have schools with grounds, for example, or gardens. Or maybe there are other ways that we can help with biodiversity, for example, in where we direct any offset income that we might receive. And then the third big question is, how can we use our influence? I think this is the area where we have massive soft power. And students come to us, as I've mentioned, from all over the world. And we've already seen that environmental awareness varies, you know, hugely from one country to another. So by influencing the individuals who attend our courses, for example, through our choice of classroom materials, we have the possibility to spread awareness and action around the world. And Helen, who is here with us today, thank you very much, Helen, has written notably on our website that talk is cheap. And I'm sure this was not intended in the sense that it's somehow easy compared to action, but rather that it is actually a cost-free action in itself that everybody can implement right now in their organizations, whether that's in the classroom or in the staff room or wherever. And then finally, the fourth big question that we all need to be asking across all areas of our organizations is, how can we reduce, recycle, and waste less? I mean, together I call this kind of waste not. And this is the area where we might actually find cost savings for our organizations, as well as helping the planet by consuming less and reducing emissions. So not all of these 4 questions might be applicable to every area of activity, but I think they're still worth asking, as they can reveal unexpected opportunities. So I noticed, sort of anecdotally this summer, a small but larger than previous number of parents, because we only work with under 18s, bringing their children to the UK. You know, through the tunnel, rather than flying, and deliberately doing that, partly because they just wanted to have a holiday whilst the kids were with us, but partly also because they don't want to fly. You know, it's a hassle apart from anything. And for all I know, they might just, you know, like many of us, have an increasing aversion to flying. So I think that's one thing that ELT organizations can be doing, you know, pointing out the alternatives to flying. But I think realistically, if people want to continue coming to the UK on short courses like ours, the majority are going to fly. So our answer to that is to accept that people are going to fly and say, right, how can we kind of nudge the dial in the right direction a little bit? And that is by just giving simple advice to people, things like, you know, take direct flights if you can. Or if there is a service, use it rather than, you know, being accompanied by mum or dad. You know, if we are to continue, you know, in business in the way that we currently are, with people coming to the UK to learn English, then there are things we can do to nudge things in the right direction across every area of what we do. And here's one example with regard to transport. And that's only transport to and from the UK. I mean, there are things that we can do about transport in the UK as well. It's not as easy as we might think, but if enough people start to say, okay, we're going to take a train or we're going to take a coach instead of taxis, for example, for airport transfers. But basically, the bigger the vehicle of transport, the more efficient it is. And it's not always easy because, you know, rail services are unreliable, and you know, you try getting 100 students onto a train, or even try talking to the you know, the train service about it, and they often as not the answer is no, we're not set up to do that. But where we can, switch to more environmentally forms of travel within the UK. And again, if everybody, if hundreds of organizations across thousands and thousands of students every summer are doing this, then we're nudging things in the right direction. It's not a solution. It's not going to make us carbon neutral, but it's definitely accepting the reality of the situation and nudging things in the way that they need to go. So in other words, we'd be reducing, not eliminating, but reducing greenhouse gases effectively through our choice and our choices in the UK and our advice to people coming to the UK. So, I mean, if we take, I said that not all of these questions will apply to every area, but what about this? How can we increase biodiversity? Can we apply that to transport? It seems a strange question, but I believe the answer is yes, we can. What I have in mind is offsetting. And I know that that's a dirty word with some people, but it's not with me. Because I think that if we can either institutionally or together with our clients offset the carbon cost of each flight for staff and students coming to and going coming to the UK and going back home again, then that compensation, if you like, that payment can be used to compensate for the damage that the flight has caused. I mean, this is the way I see it. And I know people will, you know, say, oh, that sounds like greenwashing because you're not really solving the problem. But what I'm saying is we accept the reality of the situation and try to improve it. So if we accept the reality of the situation that people are going to fly to and from the UK, they still want to do that. And if they don't come to my school, they'll go to somebody else's school. Then how can we make the most of that? And to me, if people are prepared to pay an offset fee for each flight, or if the organisation is prepared to pay it on their behalf, or a combination of the two, we can then channel those funds into something useful. And in our case, you know, we've done things like CO2 offsetting projects in developing countries where our payments go to support clean cook stoves, so that people have to use less wood in their stoves. And that means that there's less pressure on the woodland of the local area. But it doesn't have to be a project like that. It doesn't have to be something happening in a faraway place and therefore, you know, with question marks over its credibility. It could be something in our backyards. It could be supporting a local, you know, community allotment. It could be creating a local woodland. It could be, you know, sending payments up to a verifiable scheme, you know, rewilding scheme in Scotland. So the answer to my own question is, how can we increase biodiversity with regard to transport? It is possible in the way I've described. And then quickly going through the two others, because time is ticking by quickly, much more quickly than I anticipated. How can we use our influence? I've touched on that by talking to our clients about, you know, better ways to travel, by talking to staff, for example, about, you know, how they're getting to and from work. And how can we reduce, recycle, waste less? Well, I think we've kind of covered those in how can we reduce greenhouse gases in this particular context. So what I would recommend really to organizations is that they go through each area of their operation in this way with other colleagues, sort of brainstorming all aspects of what you do and identifying where you can best make changes. Okay, I did promise to talk about support for your efforts, and the first I'm going to mention is our own website, Green Action ELT UK, and I'm just going to try and flip over to that. So this is the take action section, and this is what this is our support for ELT organizations. Over a couple of years, we've had experts in various areas, ELT professionals, you know, chalk-faced teachers, everybody contributing ideas on the different areas of activity of English language teaching from a green perspective. And Helen mainly has put it all together and summarized things and made it a really valuable resource. So if we take travel and transport, for example, that area that we were looking at, as well as giving background information, it gives advice on what we can do. It talks about flying less and how that might be achieved, and lighter. It talks about whether flying really is bad for the environment, and that's an interesting question, because you'll hear some people saying, oh, it's only 2% of greenhouse gases or something, so, but it's certainly worth getting your head around why it really is a problem. And then encourage and support cycling and public transport for students and staff. Again, some nice simple ideas here. And here you go, keep international ELT events online. And even if you can't keep international ELT events online, all of the above still apply. Enhance your online offer, prioritize long stays. And prioritizing long stays as well as making better use of those necessary flights are obviously a boon for the language schools as well. I mean, if people are going to come, then you know, rather than stay a weekend and burn lots of greenhouse gases in the way, if they stay 4 weeks, it kind of makes it's sort of a better use of the damage that's being caused by the flight. And raise awareness among students. This is where we're talking about influence. Support environmental projects. And then here's Helen's particular take on offsetting, and you will perhaps detect a healthy skepticism there. and then let's explore collective action. Oh, sorry, that's a sort of general conclusion to the page rather than being directly applicable to transport. So just flipping back to where we were. Oh, and I'll also just have a look at on teaching green, for example, where you'll see that these actions here cover all of the main areas that we've identified. So food and waste, energy and water, digital and online. You know, that in itself it's great if we move online, but there again are things that we can do digitally and online and in terms of admin to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the digital world. Teaching green, this is a whole section about, you know, what we can do in classrooms, waste and recycling, and other resources. So flicking back to where we were. So I asked a question on English UK, the sort of their internal forum the other day, about funding. If anyone has received funding to help with the cost of green actions by your organisation, could you drop me a line, please? I'm thinking of things like insulation, solar panels, heat pumps, EV chargers, etc. To which I received not one single reply, I'm afraid. So I imagine that the reason for that is that the funding isn't there for things like that. Or it could be that people are being cagey about their sources of funding, but I suspect it's the former and not the latter. I was kind of thinking about that and thinking, oh gosh, I wonder if English UK could do something about this. For example, if organisations were to pool their offset funds into an English UK sort of green funding fund, then schools might be able to apply to it for new solar panels or a new EV charging point or something like that. And then I thought, no, there are all sorts of complications with that. And eventually I talked myself round to a sort of slightly peculiar point where I kind of thought, well, hang on, why don't we use these funds to support our own green initiatives? So if you're going to be saying to parents, look, we would like you to contribute towards the flight offset charge, a carbon charge for the flights that your child is taking to and from the UK, we'll also contribute, and we will then spend this on ... And if I had a year-round language school, I might say, you know, insulating the building to full standard, or putting in a new air pump, or putting in solar panels to reduce our electricity, or to reduce our dependence on oil, for example. So some measurable and credible use for funding, and in a way this would, I hope, appeal to sort of, you know, the marketing sides in larger organizations where, you know, there may be tens of thousands of students coming to and from the UK every summer. And if their flights are offset by the organization, that's going to cost them many thousands of pounds. But if those thousands of pounds are going directly back into the organization to improve its, or to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, and or to increase biodiversity, then that's an argument that you could make would be quite a valid thing to do. And Dan, I'm going to finish by quoting you. I hope you don't mind, because I thought it was a really good example, a good positive example of the kind of things we've been talking about.
This was a post to other schools with the Green School Standard, and it was really just sort of introducing us more than anything. But we had a decarbonisation report done on our premises, and that was something that was done free of charge. It was West of England Combined Authority that did that, and that highlighted the old lights in the building. It's a Georgian listed building, so it's rather difficult to make changes to it. But it highlighted the lights as something that we could do. So energy is one of the things, you know, can we afford not to offset? If you're just going back to those objections, just from a financial, organizational point of view, can you afford not to do well? You can't afford at the moment not to look at the energy consumption in your building. You know, you need to be looking at that, given prices as they are, and just from a financial point of view, it's something you should be doing. So we've had all of our LED, all of our lights switched to LEDs, and that's going to, you know, we look at the return on investment there, and that's going to pay for itself. So these little things are well worth doing. And in terms of can we afford not to, energy is something to look at now, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if that had anything to do with the message that you've got on the screen, but
well, it does, Dan, and it was a nice positive way to finish, you know, with as I say, it's sort of ideas in action, really. So it mentions, you know, various of the things you've been doing. So, you know, your meat-free Mondays and getting rid of multiple shopping bags, reusable water bottles, recycling waste, talking to students about flights and offsetting and getting their opinion on how the offset fund should be directed. And voting on various projects, which is a really nice idea. And finally, as you mentioned, you know, replacing your lighting with LEDs. So things kind of across the board, small things, larger things, but if these are recreated in lots of language schools around the country, together, these will all make a big difference. Right, so that's it from me for now. I will try to put, oops, no. If you want to download the presentation, it is available there. I was going to try and copy that into the chat bar, but it's not allowing me to. So I will, if anybody can quickly copy that into the chat bar for others, that would be great. Two more people have their hands up, and just before we go to them, I just want to kind of like formally finish by thanking Nile actually for their sponsorship of the Green Action website. They've been doing that for 2 years now. Fingers crossed they'll continue. And we are, as a small volunteer organisation, always looking for people who would like to play a part in you know, progressing our work. So if any of you have some time on your hands, not a huge amount of time, you know, but time to, for example, meet up once a month to have a steering group meeting, and maybe time to do 1 or 2 other kind of bits and pieces, then you would be very welcome. And there's the volunteer link there. And finally, if you don't already subscribe to our email updates and event invitations, just scan the QR code there.